Chapter 7. Examiner Fan examines the list of candidates to repay his patron's kindness. Secretary Wang in the Ministry of Works shows a kindness to a friend. When Senior Licentiate Yin lost his case in the county and prefectural courts, and the Provincial Commissioner of Justice ignored his petition, he traveled post-haste to the capital, deciding to claim relationship with Commissioner Chow, in the hope that the latter would plead his case for him. Arrived at the capital, Yin found that Commissioner Chow had been promoted to the post of Vice President of the Imperial College, but he boldly sent in his card claiming kinship. When the card was presented, Vice President Chow was puzzled, for he was unable to remember any such relative. While he was considering the question, his attendant brought in another card with the name Fan Chen on it, unadorned by any title. Chow Chen remembered that this was the student he had examined in Kwantung, who had now passed the provincial examination and come to the capital for the final test. "Show him in," he ordered. Pouring out respectful greetings as he entered, Fan Chen kowtowed again and again. The vice president raised him up and asked him to be seated. His first question was, "Do you know a senior licentiate in Yin in your county? Just now he sent in a card professing to be my relative. He told my man that he was a Cantonese, but I have no such relative." "I saw him just now," said Fan Chen. "He is from Kaoyao County and is a relative to a Mr. Chow there. I don't know whether your excellency belongs to the same Chow family. Although we have the same surname, we are not related, so the senior licentiate can be no relative of mine," declared Chow Chen. He called in a servant and ordered, "Tell Senior Licentiate Yin that I am busy with public affairs, and it is not convenient for me to see him. Give him back his card." When the servant had left, Vice President Chow said, "I saw from the Kwantung list that you had distinguished yourself in the provincial capital there too, so I have been looking forward to your arrival at the capital. How is it you delayed so long?" Fan Chen told him about the death of his mother. Unable to suppress a sigh, Vice President Chow said, "Your scholarship is profound. Even if you have been delayed for a few years, you will certainly pass the metropolitan examination now. Besides, I have recommended you frequently to influential officials, and they are all eager to have you as their pupil. Just stay quietly in your lodgings to review your books thoroughly. If you are short of money, I shall be glad to help you." "I shall never forget your great kindness," said Fan Chen. After they had talked for some time, the vice president entertained Fan Chen to dinner, and then he took his leave. When the results of the metropolitan examination came out, Fan Chen had indeed passed. He was given an official post as censor, and a few years later he was made Commissioner of Education for Shantung. On the day that this decree was issued, he went to see Vice President Chow. "Although Shantung is my native place, I have no commissions to trouble you with," said Chow Chen. "I remember, though, that when I was teaching in Husei Market, there was a pupil there called He-sun Mei. He was just 7 at that time, but after all these years he must have grown up. He comes of a farmer's family, and I don't know if he has completed his studies. But if he takes the examination, I hope you will read his paper carefully. And if he shows any talent at all, I should be very much obliged if you would let him pass." Fan Chen bore this in his mind when he went to Shantung, but he had been supervising examinations for 6 months or more before he went to Yinchao Prefecture, where 3 temporary buildings had been put up for the prefectural examination. And Vice President Chow's request slipped his mind. He remembered it was only the night before the results were to be published. "What could have come over me?" he thought. "My patron asked me to look out for Mr. He-sun Mei in Wenshang County, but I've done nothing about it. This is dreadful." In a flurry, he looked through the list of scholars who had taken the preliminary test for the provincial examination, but He-sun Mei's name was not there. Then he asked his secretaries for the list of those that had failed in the prefectural examination, and carefully checked their names and cell numbers. Fan Chen looked through more than 600 papers, but could not find one by He-sun Mei. He was very worried. Is it possible he didn't sit for the examination? He wondered. But if he did sit for it, how dare I face my patron in the future? I must make another careful search, even if it means postponing the results. At a feast with his secretaries, he was so worried that he infected them with his own uneasiness. "Sir," said a young secretary called Chu Chin Yu, "this reminds me of a story. Several years ago, an old scholar was appointed a commissioner for Sichuan. One day he was feasting with Mr. Ho Ching Mei, when Mr. Ho got drunk and shouted, "In Sichuan, essays like sushis only deserve the 6th rank." The old gentleman made a mental note of this, and 3 years later, when he left Sichuan and met Mr. Ho again, he told him, "I've been in Sichuan for 3 years and checked the papers extremely carefully, but I did not find one by Su Shi. He can't have entered." Laughing up his sleeve, the young man continued, "In what connection did the vice president bring up He-Sun Mei's name, sir?" Commissioner Fan was too simple to realize he was being made a fool of. With a worried frown, he said, "Since Sushi's essays were no good, it did not matter if he was not found. But Vice President Chow wants me to help this He-Sun Mei, and if I can't find him, it will be rather embarrassing." At that, Niu Pu-yu, an old secretary, suggested, "If he is from Wenshang County, why not look through the records of the dozen or so who have already passed the prefectural examination? If he has talent, he may have passed some days ago." Quite right," said the commissioner. Hastily checking through the entries, he found that the first name on the list was He-Sun Mei, and his face lit up in a smile as the anxiety he had felt all day vanished. The next morning, having graded the scholars who took the preliminary tests for the provincial examination, he issued the results and dispatched the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd ranks of candidates for the provincial examination. The first on the list of the 4th rank was Mei Chiao, who knelt down while the examiner read his essay. "Literary composition is a scholar's chief duty," said Fan Chin angrily. "How could you write such rubbish? Obviously, you must be a troublesome busybody, neglecting your proper vocation. I ought to place you last, but I will be lenient and simply punish you with a rod according to the rule." "I was unwell that day, sir," said Mei Chiao. "That was why my writing was so confused. I beg your excellency to overlook it. This is the order of the Imperial Court, which I cannot change. Attendants, drag him to the bench and punish him according to the rule." As the examiner's attendants were dragging Mei Chiao away to be beaten, the desperate candidate pleaded, "Sir, have pity on me for my patron's sake." "Who is your patron?" "The present vice president of your Imperial College, Chao Chin." So you were Vice President Chao's student. In that case, I will let you off for this one." And Fan Chin ordered his attendants to free Mei Chiao. Then Mei Chiao knelt down while the examiner admonished him, "Since you are Vice President Chao's student, there is all the more reason you should study hard. For when you produce a composition like this, you certainly disgrace his reputation. In future, mend your ways. If I find you writing like this at the next examination, I shall not pardon you again." He then told the attendants to drive Mei Chiao away. Now the examiner came to the new scholars, and the first name he called from Wenshang County was that of He-Sun Mei. A handsome young man answered from the crowd, and when he came forward, the examiner asked him, "Are you related to Mei Chiao, who is just here now?" He-Sun Mei did not understand, but made no reply. "Were you Vice President Chao's student?" asked the examiner. "Yes, he was my teacher at the primary school." "I was also Vice President Chao's student," said Examiner Fan. "And when I left the capital, he asked me to look out for your paper. I did not expect that without any help you would come first on the list. You are young and brilliant, and my patron did not teach you in vain. Go on studying hard, and you may have a fine future before you." He-Sun Mei knelt down and thanked him. When he had disposed of the other papers and sent off the new scholar to the accompaniment of gongs and drums, Commissioner Fan closed the session and shut the doors. As He-Sun Mei was leaving the examination school, he saw Mei Chiao standing by the door and could not resist asking, "When did you study with Vice President Chow, Mr. Mei?" "How would a youngster like you know?" retorted Mei. "It was before you were born. In those days he used to teach in the city and was employed as a tutor in the family of various Yamen officials. It was only later that he came to our village. But by the time he went to school, I had already passed the examination, so you did not know about our relationship. I was always a favorite with my patron, who said that my compositions showed genius, although they were unconventional. And since this is exactly the same criticism that Commissioner Fan made just now, it shows that discriminating examiners have exactly the same criterion. You know, Commissioner Fan might easily have put me in the 3rd rank, but in that case he would have no chance to speak to me. He deliberately ranked me lower in order that he could talk to me and mention his relationship to my patron, to show that he was doing me a special favor. It was for the same reason that he placed you first. We scholars should appreciate these niceties of behavior. After talking for some time, they went back to their rooms. The next day, having seen Commissioner Fan off and hired horses, they returned to Hisun Market together. The young man bowed to his mother, who was alone at home now that his father had died. She was a happy woman that day. "Since your father died, times have been hard and we have had to sell most of our land," she said. "But now that you have passed the examination and become a scholar, you'll be able to support the family by teaching." Chen Hiseung Fu was old now and could not walk without a stick, but he too hobbled over to congratulate them and arranged with Mei Chiao to collect money from the villagers to celebrate Hisun Mei's success. They collected 24 strings of cash and borrowed the Buddhist temple for the feast. Mei Chiao and Hisun Mei arrived first at the temple on the morning of the feast and were greeted by the monk. They bowed before Buddha and nodded to the monk, who said, "Congratulations, Mr. Hisun, on becoming a scholar. This is a reward for all the good deeds your worthy father did to the glory of Buddha. You were just a child with your hair in tufts when you studied here." He pointed out to them the shrine which the villagers had set up for Vice President Chao. There were incense burners and candlesticks on the table, and above it a memorial tablet on which was written in letters of gold an account of the Vice President's career. This had been presented by the villagers and monk. When they saw their patron's shrine, the two scholars bowed reverently before it several times. Then they went with the monk to the rooms behind, where Chao Chen had taught. The double door was open, overlooking the river. Several feet of the opposite bank had been washed away, while this side had grown out a little. The 3 back rooms had been separated from the rest by matting, and were no longer used as a school. The room on the left was occupied by a man from Kiangsi, on whose door was written Chen Ho Fu, fortune teller. Mr. Chen was out, however, and his door was locked. On the central wall of the hall was still pasted 2 scrolls in Chao Chen's writing. "Purge yourself of error to await the right season," and "Watch yourself and practice strict discipline," but the red paper had faded. Pointing to these scrolls, Mei Chiao told the monk, "Since this is the Vice President's calligraphy, you shouldn't leave it here. Sprinkle the scrolls with water so that you can take them down and have them remounted. You must preserve them." The monk immediately did as he was directed. Soon after which, Shin Hiseung Fu arrived with the villagers to feast for a whole day. Mr. Hisun used a few dozen of the strings of cash presented to them to redeem some articles she had pawned and to buy several peculiars of rice. The remainder was kept for Hisun Mei's traveling expenses when he took the next examination. The next year he came first in the preliminary test for the provincial examination. Truly brilliance shows itself in youth. Then, having passed the provincial examination with distinction, he went to the office of the Provincial Commissioner of Finance and took the share of caps, plates, canopies, banners, wood placards, and traveling expenses. After that, without further delay, he went to the examination at the capital, and in this examination he won the 3rd place. According to Ming Dynasty regulations, a special seat was set in the room of a successful candidate, who sat down while attendants bowed to him. While this ceremony was being performed, it was announced, "Mr. Wang Hue, a fellow graduate from Wenshang County, has come to greet Mr. Hisun." Ordering the attendants to remove the seat, Hisun Mei went out to greet the guest. A white-haired, white-bearded man came in, took Hisun Mei by the hand, and said, "Our friendship was ordained by heaven. We are not ordinary classmates." When they had bowed to each other and sat down, Wang Hue went on, "I had a dream about you long ago, which shows that our fortunes were determined by fate. In future, let us work together and help each other." Hisun Mei dimly recollected hearing something about this dream when he was a child. Thus, as soon as Wang Hue mentioned it, he understood. "Young as I am most fortunate to be on the same list as you, sir," he said. "Since we are from the same county, I shall always come to see you for your advice in future. Are these your lodgings?" "Yes." "They are small and far from the court. It cannot be very convenient for you to live here. I am quite comfortably off and have bought a house in the capital. Why not come and stay with me? It will be more convenient for the palace examinations." After chatting a little longer, Wang Hue left. The next day, accordingly, Wang Hue sent men to move Hisun Mei's luggage to his house in Sticky Rice Lane, and they stayed together. At the palace examinations, He-Sun Mei was placed in the second rank, and Wang Hue in the third. Both of them were made assistant secretaries of the Board of Works, and appointed second-class secretaries when they had served their turn. One day the two friends were sitting chatting when the servant brought in a red folder on which was written, "Your servant Chen Ho-fu pays his respects." Inside the folder was another note. Chen Ho-fu of Nanchang County in Jiangxi is adept in consulting oracles and in divination, having practiced in Kuan Yuan Temple at He-Sun Market in Wenshang County. "Do you know this man?" Wang asked He-Sun Mei. "I remember there was such a man, who was said to be very successful in consulting oracles. Why not have come in to ask about our future careers?" So he called out, "Come in." The man who walked in wore a tile-shaped cap, a raw silk gown, and a silk girdle. Had a grey beard and looked over 50. Bowing to the two scholars, he said, "I beg you gentlemen to be seated so I can pay my respects." Wang and He-Sun declined, however, and bowed to him, then made him sit down in the seat of honor. "When you stayed in Kuan Yin Temple in my humble district," said He-Sun Mei, "I did not have the good fortune to meet you." "I knew that you had come to the temple, sir," rejoined Chen Ho-fu with a bow. 3 days before, the Taoist saint Lu Chun-yang had made known to me in a seance that afternoon on that day a nobleman would arrive. But since you had not then received news of your promotion, and the will of heaven must not be disclosed, I deliberately avoided meeting with you. "May I ask you who taught you to call up spirits?" inquired Wang Hue. "Can you call up Lu Chungyang only, or other saints as well?" "I can call up all spirits," replied Chen Ho-fu. "Emperors, generals, ministers, sages, or gallants all come at my call. Frankly, gentlemen, for many years now I have not been roaming the country but living in the mansions of princes and the yamen of high officials. In the 13th year of Hung Qian, I conducted a seance for Mr. Liu, Minister of the Board of Works, who wanted to ask the oracle what would be the fate of Minister Li Mingyan, who had been imprisoned for impeaching Lord Shang. To our amazement, it was the Duke of Chao who appeared and wrote, 'In 7 days the cycle will be complete.' Sure enough, on the 7th day, Minister Li was released, his only punishment being the deduction of 3 months' salary. Later, Minister Li asked me to hold another seance, but for a long time the brush did not move. And suddenly it started swinging wildly to write a poem, the concluding couplet of which ran, 'I dreamed that I went south to visit my ancestral temple, but who was there from the former capital?' The gentlemen who were looking on did not know what spirit this was. Only Minister Li understood the poem. He hastily burned incense and prostrated himself to ask what great emperor was addressing him. Then, as quick as lightning, the brush wrote, 'Emperor Qian Wen.' They all dropped fearfully to their knees to prostrate themselves. That is why I say I can call up emperors and sages alike. With your great skill," said Wang Hue, "I wonder if you can tell us the various posts we are going to hold for the rest of our lives." "Certainly," replied Chen. "Future riches, rank, trials, and penury, or the span of a man's life can all be discovered from the oracles, whose predictions invariably come true." Since he spoke so confidently, the two scholars said, "We would like to ask what our subsequent appointments are likely to be." "Then let me ask you to burn incense, gentlemen." "Wait a little," they said. "We must eat first." They entertained Chen Ho-fu to a meal, while they took a servant to go to his lodgings to fetch the sand tray and oracle's brush. "You must pray silently, gentlemen," Chen instructed them. "Then set up the brush above the desk." When he had prostrated himself and burnt a magic formula to invoke the oracle, he asked Wang Hue and He-Sun Mei to support the brush. He then uttered an incantation and burnt another magic formula to beg the spirit to draw near. And at that the brush began to sway slightly. Chen Ho-fu told the servant to pour a cup of tea and knelt to present this with both hands to the spirit. At that the brush described several circles and stopped moving. Chen Ho-fu burnt another magic formula and ordered them all to be absolutely quiet, sending the servant and relatives out of the room. After the time it takes for a meal, the brush began to move again and wrote, "Let Mr. Wang mark our pronouncement." Wang Hue promptly let go of the brush and plumped down to kowtow 4 times, after which he asked, "May I inquire the Great Spirit's honorable name?" He then returned to hold the brush again. The brush moved rapidly to trace the words, "I am Lord Kuan Yu, conqueror of the devils." Chin Ho Fu was so overawed that he kowtowed as fast as a pistol pounding onions. Fuck. "Because of your sincerity today, we have been able to call up this mighty spirit," he told the two scholars. "That is not easy. You two gentlemen are in luck. But you must show great respect, for if there is the least negligence, I don't know how I shall answer for it." The two scholars were so overwhelmed with awe that their hair was standing on end. They let go of the brush to prostrate themselves 4 times before resuming their post. "Wait a moment," said Chen Ho Fu. "This sand tray is small, and a great spirit like this may have lengthy injunctions which won't fit on it. Give me a sheet of paper to make a note of all that is written." Paper and brush were brought to Chen Ho Fu, while the other two went on supporting the brush, which wrote in a flash, "You are to be congratulated on achieving Hesun Dynasty rank and plucking red blossoms on high. There are misty waves on the river during your 2 days at office. The horses leading the way turn out to be ministers of the celestial court. Meeting lutes and lyres, your heart aches at 1 cup of wine." After this, another sentence was added. "Sit to the tune of Moonlight on the Western River." The three men could not make head or tail of this. "The first sentence is the only one I understand," said Wang. "The Hesun Dynasty students took the examination at the age of 50, and I have just passed at 52. "That is right. As for what follows, I don't understand a word of it." "The oracle never lies," said Chen Ho Fu. "If you keep this, its truth will be proved miraculously later. That line about ministers of the celestial court must mean that you'll be promoted to the rank of prime minister." Only too eager to believe this, Wang Yue felt overjoyed. Then Hesun Mei prostrated himself to ask for a message from the oracle. For a long time the brush did not budge, and when they pleaded urgently for an answer, it wrote, "Stop." Chen Ho Fu smoothed the sand on the tray to receive another message, but again the word "stop" was written. He smoothed the sand 3 times, only to receive the same answer each time, after which the brush ceased moving altogether. "The spirit must have returned to heaven," said Chen Ho Fu. "We must not trouble it any more." He then burnt another magic formula in farewell, packed up the brush and the incense burner and the sand tray, and sat down with them again. The 2 scholars had presented him with a half-tael of silver and a letter of introduction to the newly appointed Commissioner Fan. Chen Ho Fu thanked them and left. That evening an attendant announced, "Someone has come from Mr. Hesun's family." A Hesun family servant in mourning rushed in and kowtowed. "The old lady passed away on the 21st of last month," he reported, kneeling. When Hesun Mei heard this, he uttered a cry and fell to the ground, and Wang Yue had the greatest difficulty in reviving him. Hesun Mei was about to send in a petition asking to go home for the period of mourning, when Wang said, "Think it over. It will soon be time for the appointment of officers, and we both stand a good chance. But if you announce your mourning, you will have to go home and wait for another 3 years. Wouldn't that be a pity? Better hush this up until the appointment." "You're a real friend," said Hesun, "but I don't see how this can be hidden. Quickly order the man from your home to take off his mourning and forbid him to let outsiders know of it. Tomorrow morning I will see what I can do." Early the next morning they invited Chin Tung Ye, the clerk who kept the records in the Board of Civil Office, to come over and discuss the matter with them. Officials must not try to conceal their mourning, Chin told them. Only if you're a key man in an important office can you suspend your mourning and remain at your post. But even then you have to be recommended by high-ranking officials. We are in no position to do anything. Of course, if such a recommendation comes, I shall do what I can for you. That goes without saying. When they had begged Chin to do all that he could, he left. That evening, Hesun Mei changed into a blue gown and a small cap, and went secretly to beg his 2 teachers, Vice President Chow and Examiner Fan, to recommend him, and they both thought this might be arranged. After 2 or 3 days, however, their replies came, "Your official rank is too low for this. Permission to suspend mourning and remain at one's post is ordinarily granted only to Prime Minister or some other very high officials. An officer holding an important frontier post may also be considered. But the post of Second Secretary of the Board of Works is a sinecure which makes any such recommendation difficult. So there was nothing for it but for Hesun Mei to send in a petition to go home for the period of mourning. "This funeral is going to cost money," said Wang. "But you are only a poor scholar. How will you manage? Besides, I see that you don't like dealing with such troublesome affairs. The best thing would be for me to take a holiday too and go back with you. I will find the few hundred taels you need for the funeral. In any case, it can't be helped. Why should I delay you two? The appointments won't be made until next year," said Wang. "But since you must wait until you are out of mourning, you will have to miss your chance. In any case, I can ask for leave for 3 or at most 6 months and still get back in time." He-sun Mei could not refuse. Together they went home and arranged Mrs. He-sun's funeral. For 7 days, all the district and provincial officials came to offer their condolences, and the whole place was in a hubbub. Men and women came from miles around to see the funeral. Shin He-sing-fu was dead, but his son Shin Wen-chen had become village head in place of his father-in-law, village head He-sai, and he was now offered his services in He-sun Mei. The funeral lasted 2 hectic months, after which Wang Hue, having lent He-sun Mei more than 1,000 taels of silver, said goodbye and set out for the capital. Thanking him again and again, He-sun Mei saw him off to the boundary of the county. Wang Hue reached the capital without adventure and reported his return. Soon a servant came in with a messenger carrying a congratulatory announcement. But to know the good news Wang Hue received, you must read the following chapter.